It's Tuesday here on The Story, and tonight, layoffs not only hitting ODOT hard, but Intel sending hundreds into unemployment in Washington County. Plus, we just got new data on Portland street response, looking at what the teams do once they're called to a scene. One local business owner is not impressed. But first, just how much money is being spent on homelessness in the Tri-County area and where it ends up? The problem with the region's response that researchers are now warning about. It's our big story tonight.
So we are all still sort of stumbling around in a poorly lit room. And this was just one attempt.
So that's how a senior policy advisor at ECOnorthwest, a Portland-based research firm, describes the region's response to homelessness, especially when it comes to money being spent to address it. Today, the firm released its third and final report on how much money is being spent on homelessness and where it's ending up. Here's the report. Take a look. It's called Sources and Uses of Resources to Address Homelessness in the Portland Region. Again, this is the last of 3 annual reports, and this one is focused on fiscal year 2024, which ran from July 2023 to the end of June 2024. Now, those behind the report call it the most complete understanding of homelessness intervention in the nation. Big statement there. Okay, so let's dive in. The report looked at money from the following sources: federal, state, regional, county, city, and private. And these are the groups they looked at: Multnomah County, Washington County, Metro, the City of Portland, Home Forward, Oregon Housing, and Community Services, including 50 nonprofits. That's more nonprofits getting money for homelessness than when this study started 3 years ago.
It's a complex landscape. As you can sort of tell, there are many different funding streams coming in, and there's a variety of different government entities that are sort of touching this, and then obviously lots of different nonprofits that are providing it. So it's an especially sort of complex fiscal landscape.
Researchers found between summer of 2023 to 2024, more than $700 million were spent on efforts to address homelessness. That money going to a total of 522 different groups across the Tri-County area, Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas counties. Take a look. Here's how it breaks down. More than $300 million in regional spending. That's mainly supportive housing services, or SHS tax dollars. More than $100 million from the federal government, $70 million from Multnomah County, $66 million from the City of Portland, and just $39 million from the state. Researchers warn recent federal legislation could impact these amounts moving forward a lot.
As you sort of look through and understand the composition of the money that you have, you can start to look at where you've got risk. And I would say we have an awful lot of risk in that federal space. And by extension of the big, beautiful bill, I would say the state appropriations are also at risk.
A spokesperson for Regional Government Metro told us even before the Trump administration, the federal government made only a small contribution to efforts to address homelessness, one of the most significant issues in our country. With federal support likely to be cut even further, these regional resources are more important, and this is why we're working to meet this challenge at the regional level. But going back now to that total of more than $700 million spent during fiscal year 2024, you can see here more than $250 million went to safety on and off the streets. About $219 million spent on supportive housing, $141 million for housing placement, $64 million on system access, assessment, and navigation, and $46 million on admin costs. Now, I know what you may be thinking. Those are pretty broad categories. Like, what does safety on and off the streets even mean? And what is system access, assessment, and navigation? Well, according to researchers, it depends on who you ask, and that is one of the problems they ran into.
All those categories of uses found their root stock in Multnomah County's way of characterizing spending. Metro then sort of adopted most of the nouns and verbs of that accounting, the safety off and on the streets and the housing placement, et cetera. We did encounter some different interpretations between counties on what they were considering, which broad categories they were putting different kinds of spending in, and that stuff just needs to be better aligned.
The researchers then broke down where geographically this money was spent. And no surprise, the most, more than $500 million, was spent in Multnomah County. And here's how those amounts break down into those broad categories that I just mentioned. For example, on top there, more than $200 million spent on safety on and off the streets in Multnomah County, compared to $16 million spent for the same thing in Clackamas County. Well, if you think about it, that checks out, seeing as there are more homeless people on the streets in Multnomah County than Clackamas. And when it comes to supportive housing, $130 million was spent in Multnomah County, and about $45 million spent in Washington and Clackamas each.
And what's going to stand out here, as you look at Multnomah County, a sizable amount of spending on safety on and off the streets and shelters and outreach. Obviously, a large disproportionate share of the region's unsheltered homeless population is located in Multnomah County.
Okay, so interesting data, but what's it all for? Well, researchers hope it will guide not only local leaders, but state lawmakers too, when building homelessness funding packages. Not only that, but they hope the data helps build trust with you, the public, giving people an understanding of how much is being spent, who is spending it, and for roughly what purpose. In the end, those behind the report believe there needs to be more alignment with the region's response, something that we hear time and time again, especially when it comes to tracking dollars that flow from state agencies directly to nonprofits, as well as being able to track outcomes, considering that, yes, between summer of 23 and summer of 24, more than $700 million were spent on homelessness in the region, and the issue, frankly, did not improve.
This work should be considered a launching pad, not an endpoint. This is, I would still consider to be a fairly crude assessment, and there's just an awful lot more is needed to be able to manage this system well and to build trust, public trust in how these dollars are being managed and spent. At some point, you've got to take these dollars that we're talking about and getting better at counting, and take all that much richer information that we have about the people who are serving and start to put dollars to people and really understand, okay, as we're doing sort of long-term permanent solutions for individuals, how much are we spending per year on individuals? What is the distribution of that?
Okay, so what is going through your mind? Did anything surprise you from the report? If so, what is it and why? Let us know. Email the story at kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. And speaking of money spent on homeless services, last week we told you about Portland Street Response expanding. That's the unarmed group responding to nonviolent calls when people are in some sort of crisis. Oftentimes, it's 911 calls involving those living on our streets. Well, City Council set aside $2 million in this year's budget for the program, and late last month passed a resolution to strengthen it, formally establishing it as an equal branch of the city's public safety system. It also ensures members are not used for homeless camp sweeps, commits to expanding the program 24/7 citywide, an effort that will take 2 years, and creates a community advisory committee. Now, the mayor has been praising the program since he took office. And well, after our story aired last week, we got some new data from the city about the program. Here's what stood out to us. From the start of this year to June 10th, Portland Street Response was called 5,902 times. Of those calls, they actually made contact with someone just under 3,000 times, so less than half. And let's break that down even further. Over 2,500 times, the call was canceled because they couldn't find the person. And when they did find the person, 118 times, that person refused care. And over 2,700 times, PSR staff treated a person and then that person was released per PSR protocol. That part right there, the treating and releasing, has some people questioning what good that does, saying it doesn't solve or change that person's behavior. This week, I spoke with a Southeast Portland business owner. He says he's called 911, but has been sent Portland Street Response instead of police, about half a dozen times recently. And this was for things like threats of violence from homeless people trespassing and drug use on his property. Now you're going to see me, not him, because he didn't want to go on camera for fear of retaliation.
So when we call someone for help, and then we get sent the PSR, and they're there with a different priority that's not aligned with why we are calling for services.
And have you been happy with how Portland Street Response has responded to like when they get there, or are you not happy with how they go about doing things?
I'm not happy at all because they probably are doing a good job from their point of view because they're trying to connect these people with whatever help they need. They give them water, blankets. They have little like barista stands in their vans, and they make them coffee and tea. So we're calling for services to have this problem go away, and they come and they draw more people, hook them up with whatever, and leave.
And the data supports that. When looking at referrals as part of their aftercare program, 115 times PSR staff referred people to food, 30 times clothing and hygiene, and just 51 referrals for shelter. And again, more than 2,700 times Portland Street Response left the person right where they found them. I will add that part of this program expansion allows Portland Street Response to drive people to shelters, detox, etc. Before they relied on cabs. But as always, that person has to want to go. But still, this type of response has forced that business owner to hire his own private security.
What does it mean when you call for services and you get sent them instead? What's the accountability process as far as, well, thank you, they came, and then I still need the services?
Now, for its part, Portland Street Response tells me the availability of resources and referrals has been a long-standing challenge for the program, especially after business hours and on weekends. They say it has been getting better the last few months when it comes to shelter referrals because of growing shelter capacity. Now, total referrals to shelter from initial PSR responses, not that aftercare number we mentioned earlier, is 201. Well, a week from today, hundreds of employees at Intel in Oregon will be losing their jobs, the company announced today. It's part of a broader restructuring effort first announced last month. That includes laying off 15 to 20% of factory workers. 529 people, mostly engineers and researchers, will be losing their jobs at the Aloha campus, along with the Ronler Acres, Hawthorne Farms, and Intel Jones campuses in Hillsborough. It's the latest hit for Intel workers in Oregon, the state's largest private employer. Last year, they cut around 3,000 jobs, according to the Oregonian. Tech experts say Intel has fallen behind other companies in the semiconductor race, especially as artificial intelligence technology booms. Intel says they're trying to position the company for the future, writing, quote, "We are taking steps to become a leaner, faster, and more efficient company. Removing organizational complexity and empowering our engineers will enable us to better serve the needs of our customers and strengthen our execution." Intel still has around 20,000 employees in Oregon, but the news has many thinking about the ripple effects, not just the 500 workers laid off, but the property taxes they pay, the schools their kids go to, and other businesses in the community who rely on Intel workers. State Senator Janine Salman, a Democrat who represents Washington County, says this was not unexpected.
State economists warned us of this. They warned of a manufacturing recession. And the problem is that the jobs won't necessarily, when someone loses their job at Intel, they can't just bounce to another job necessarily and be employed. That's the concern, is that it will be difficult. And, this just affects everyday lives.
Senator Salman says she's been in contact with Intel. She says they're still very tied to Oregon, and she's committed to working with Governor Kotek and Intel to make sure the state is supporting the semiconductor and advanced manufacturing industry. But we heard a lot during the legislative session, mostly from Republicans, that Oregon is not friendly to businesses and has too many regulations. Well, today, Oregon businessman Jordan Schnitzer reached out to us to talk about this, saying that the state could be doing more, especially compared to other states where Intel operates.
Oregon, for a lot of reasons, is perceived as being not a very friendly business state. And for someone that has real estate in 6 states, Phoenix is booming right now. There are Seattle, Puget Sound area, and so forth. These communities welcome businesses. They attitudinally and verbally put the word out, we want you here. The state's fallen into a malaise and attitude of being anti-business. Now, that's not the reason I think Intel is cutting back right now. But in their decision as to where they would expand again, I'm not sure Oregon would be top of the list, even though we have more of their operations here than any place in the world. So Oregonians, wake up.
Senator Salman says next session she wants to work on an economic development strategy, but she thinks there's a lot more going on here than the state's red tape.
This is global. This isn't an Oregon concern. This is a United States and a global concern. We're seeing efforts that are in advancements around semiconductor and advanced manufacturing in other countries that we haven't seen before. When I was on co-chair with Representative, now Congresswoman Janine Bynum, we often talked about the global leaders in semiconductor and advanced manufacturing. And that was Taiwan, that was South Korea, and it was Oregon. And so this type of nature is very cyclical in that we are seeing, but I think it is deeper. It is more deeply impacted by the global market and concerns around tariffs. That is a real legitimate concern.
Oregon Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamichi sent us a statement saying, I am deeply disappointed about these layoffs, especially considering the federal investments Congress directed to Intel. It is my sincere hope that the changes Intel is making will reverse the factors that led to layoffs and help them regain their standing. Intel had been awarded nearly $8 billion last year in the CHIPS Act funding by the Biden administration, but they've only received about $2 billion of that. And the Trump administration says it's renegotiating the program. While we're on the topic of layoffs, today we heard from an ODOT employee losing her job at the end of the month, thanks to the agency's major cuts to balance the budget. Her firsthand knowledge of how the cuts will impact rural areas. That's when the story returns. With President Trump signing his big, beautiful bill last week, one of the biggest issues that had most Democrats and even some Republicans in D.C. divided were cuts and changes to Medicaid. And we're exploring that story, but we want to hear from you. So if you're on Medicaid or have experience with it and have been told about changes or are worried about what happens next, let us know. Email the story at kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. If you have a question about it, send it our way. We're working on a story for tomorrow night, and we want to get as many answers as we can. Well, turning now to some of your thoughts on our big story from last night. Fireworks in Portland, the ban on personal use that's not really working, and the new online reporting tool that received thousands of complaints. Anne didn't hold back in her email, writing, "Hate them. Hate the people who insist on setting them off, the cretins who can't respect pets, wildlife, people with PTSD. I don't know what the solution is, but it appears that the criminals have taken over the city."
I could not find the firework reporting form. I'm a veteran, very triggered by all of the fireworks and very frustrated. Fireworks started at 6 p.m. and went until 4:30 a.m. and nobody could do anything about it. It's just not right.
Now, when it comes to that online reporting form, it was clear to us that it was not used for police for enforcement purposes, but it did cut down on 911 calls related to fireworks. Last year, on July 4th, there was a 26-second delay when calling 911. Well, that dropped to 8 seconds this year. The public information officer for Portland Fire and Rescue says the online reports could be used in the future to help map out hotspots for firework activity. But the lack of an actual plan for what to do with those reports did not sit well with a viewer named Lori.
Might, maybe, possibly for the future. Boy, that doesn't strike any confidence in me that anything is going to come out of it than lessen the calls to 911. I agree, that's very important. But where, again, is the accountability?
Now, those of you on the pro-fireworks side of the debate did not email or call us directly, but commented on our YouTube videos. One viewer writing, "These people complaining and calling the police should spend the 4th of July in Canada or wear earplugs for the night." And when it comes to Portland's ban, another viewer chimed in saying, "Hey, there are people openly smoking meth and fentanyl in the streets of Portland, along with open-air drug markets, and no one cares. But let's do a segment on fireworks and complain about that." Good point, but we do far more reporting on fentanyl and drug markets than we do fireworks. But thanks for watching. Today, we're hearing from an ODOT employee who is one of nearly 500 people being laid off at the end of the month, part of the largest layoff in Oregon government history.
I'm okay. I'm going to be fine, but
Yeah.
and I know the guys will be fine. It's just it's a shock. It's one big shock.
That's Sharon Helms. She's a part-time at ODOT worker in Wheeler County. She's out of a job in just a few weeks, along with several others. She says her husband will be the only one left at the ODOT facility in the town of Spray.
What can one man do? All he can do is kick rocks off the road, maybe remove dead wildlife. He can't, jump in the loader and clean ditches. When these roads start falling apart, I mean, we're maintenance. We put Band-Aids on it and try to keep them, at least halfway decent.
Helms says she did not want that initial transportation funding package proposed by state Democrats, but she's disappointed the legislature gave up on a compromise to at least cover the basics.
I would willingly pay a 3 to 5 cent gas tax extra if I knew it was all going to keep the roads safe.
Again, Governor Kotek has hinted at the possibility of calling lawmakers back for a special session to do something about transportation funding before winter. But so far, she has not done that. Stay with us. We're back right after this. Well, that is the end of our show, folks. Thanks so much for watching. The good stuff is coming your way next. And don't forget, everyone has a story to tell. Have a great Tuesday night. I'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 6:30.